All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to both our panelists. Thank you so much for taking time out of this close to end of term time when I'm sure you have plenty to do on your plate. So thank you very much for that. And thank you to all our participants who are signing in bit by bit as we come on, as they come on. I thought this might be a good time to have this skills workshop in that we could, you'll be starting conversations as you are closing up with fall term. Hello, Marina, welcome. And you'll also be moving to an entirely remote world shortly with winter term. So getting more of these communication hints under your belt, I think as you go into that, it's going to be pretty important. I just want to talk a little bit about what to expect in the next hour or so. I'll have each of our fabulous panelists introduce themselves. And then I've got a series of questions, but I really encourage the audience to please sign on with questions as well. And we'll take some of those as we're going through. At about quarter till or so, we'll go ahead and stop the formal interview conversation. And then we'll move to just general questions that any of our student audience might have in mind. Victoria, I'd love it if you went first. And the idea being that if each of you could tell me your name, tell everyone your name, what undergrad school you went to, what your major was, the department you're in now, a specific lab if you are, since many of the students know some of the labs around Dartmouth, maybe the project you're working on and what you think your future plans might be. Great. Victoria?
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria. I went to Dartmouth. I was a 20, actually, so I just graduated in June. I was a French major, but a biology minor and also pre-med, so I did a lot of sciences. I'm currently a teaching science fellow at Dartmouth still. I'm living in Richardson behind me as a resident fellow as well. So I'm working in biology and chemistry, and I'm working with Bio 14 right now, and then I'll be with Bio 14 and Chem 5 in the winter. And I'm currently also applying to medical school, so I was pre-med at Dartmouth too.
Excellent. Thank you, Victoria. Jessica, can we have you go next, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica. So my undergrad is actually Claflin University in South Carolina, and my major there was biochemistry. But originally, I started out biology, minor in art. Oh well, yeah, that's a long story. I ended up coming here to Dartmouth. This is my second year. I graduated from Claflin in 2019, so I haven't been fresh. I'm kind of close to you all. Um, and currently I'm in the Cool Lab. So John Cool, he teaches Chem 41, if any of you all are familiar. He's a really cool guy. Haha, that's always the joke we play. Um, and right now we're just kind of working on virulent factors in different bacteria. Right now I'm working with E. coli. And so, yeah, things are going pretty good so far. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you, Jessica. Danielle, would you introduce yourself next, please?
Yes, of course. My name is Danielle. I am actually also a Dartmouth 20. In my undergrad, I was double majored in computer science and economics and minored in Asian studies. Now I'm a first/last year master's student in the computer science department in the 4+1 program. In my undergrad, I was in the cognition and education lab in the education department, which was actually, I started as a WISP student before moving to the Mind, Machine, and Society lab in the computer science department doing machine learning research. Currently, I am on a course track, so I'm actually not in a lab, but I am based in security and privacy work and AR and VR technology, like app development through the Dolly lab. Future plan-wise, this year after I am currently in the whole recruitment job search cycle for tech jobs and will hopefully be having some kind of full-time job by next year. That's it for me.
Yeah, I know we're all like crossing fingers for you. Thank you, Danielle. Thanks for sharing that. Amelia, would you introduce yourself next for us?
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Amelia. I grew up in Oregon and went to the University of Oregon.
Hey, I'm in Oregon too, Portland.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I grew up in Astoria.
I'm in
but
Hillsborough.
nice,
Sorry.
nice. Yeah, so I went to UO and after that, didn't really know what I wanted to do, but applied to a one-year master's program at the University of Cambridge in England and did that, which was cool and kind of put me on the path of continuing in science. And I should have said I majored in biology as an undergrad. And made my way here. And I now am a third year PhD student in the biology department, working with Caitlin Hicks-Prees. We're the soil lab. And I actually identify with my program more than my department. I'm in the EES program, the Ecology, Environment, Ecosystem Society. And so there's a lot of different folks in my program, like anthropologists, geologists, environmental science folks, and yeah, it's a great time. So I study soil and these cool things called mycorrhizal fungi, and I get to do my field work in the Upper Valley area.
Amelia, thank you so much. I think there are a lot of great stories and how we all got to this point now, just burbling up. Marina, will you introduce us, please?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Marina. I'm a fourth year PhD student in Joshua Obar's lab. I don't think he teaches any undergraduate level courses. But that's, I think, a good example of that there's more professors out there than who you might come across in your classes. So I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, and I went to the University of California, San Diego, UCSD, for my undergrad, where I majored in microbiology and immunology. While I was there, I did research at the Scripps Research Institute, where I studied influenza. I got my master's because I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go to an MD program or a PhD program, because I originally was pre-med, but I enjoyed my experience at Scripps Research so much. So I just gave myself 2 extra years to just kind of explore, but still kind of progress my career. And there I studied HIV replication. And fell absolutely in love with research and applied to Dartmouth, where I did my first year here in the MCB program. And then I decided to take a leave of absence, and I worked for a year and a half as a biosafety officer at UCLA, where I specialize in high containment, which is like BSL-3, BSL-4, super dangerous pathogens and whatnot. And then I came back to Dartmouth because I really missed being in the lab. And now I'm here today.
Marina, thank you so much. That's great. Again, another great path. So you fed right into my lead. Thank you. I did not introduce myself earlier, thinking that everyone online might know who I am. But again, my name is Dawn Carey. I was actually an undergraduate here as well, many moons ago. I also got my MPH here at Dartmouth. I started as a chem major at Dartmouth back in the 80s, early 80s. Actually worked as a chemist during all my off terms and moved to anthropology. And I think about it a lot as I am in this work about why did I make that change? And so it's fascinating as I see how people's careers are different now, and I might have made different choices. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit about what the goal of today is. And, thinking a little bit about, before everybody jumped on, we were talking a little bit about what our first memory is of getting up the guts to talk to a professor. And depending on what your earlier education experiences might have been before coming to Dartmouth, you might have more or less ease with that. And I just want to talk, before we get into some of the specifics and ideas that some of our guests have in mind. I want to talk a little bit about why we want to even broach this subject, right? So, some of the things are very utilitarian, right? It might be that you're looking for better feedback on the work you're doing, either, in class or, in some way. And that might be very of the moment. I need to get this information because that's going to help you. It also might be about getting an internship or a research position should you decide to go through the WISP matching program. Letters of recommendation further on as you go down, being able to have that conversation. The other thing I like to talk about, though, is that these are also your future colleagues. So thinking about even looking at this panel of women here, if you say in the sciences, these are women or men, professors that you might have that you may be working with for the rest of your life. So getting to that peer level through this early communication makes it easier as you go forward. And just as an aside, with all of us interacting primarily through Zoom, there's also being able to really leverage human connection right now. So being able to make that, I think, is that element is really important. That said, they're really busy people. So we're going to take this hour or so to talk about some different techniques that and ideas that will make it easier, and something that both sides are kind of getting something out of it. I wanted to jump in with my first, just hearing what our panelists have to say. We've all heard horror stories. We've also all heard really great stories. So I'd love to hear from Danielle. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe what one of your worst communication stories was, if you have any, I don't know, with a professor?
I think the worst, and it's probably just me like catastrophizing it, is just like sending an email and just never getting a response. I think like, especially if it's like a professor that you're interested in, like you email them and you're like kind of hopeful, checking, and then like you're like, yep, never getting a response to that. And like that is also just understanding that that professor might have just like lost it in their inbox. So like definitely if it's like something important, just like I like to send an email. I don't know where I got this from. Definitely stole it from someone that says like, "Hi, just excavating this from your inbox." Like but also like if it's, I think it's also just like, and then learning when to let go also, like don't just like kind of keep bumping it. But I would say the vast majority of professors at Dartmouth are so happy to answer emails. And like most professors will be like, won't just keep the emails. They'll be like, oh cool, let's set up a meeting like an hour and like let's talk. And I think that is something that the vast majority of professors here are so happy to do.
That is excellent. And I think your worst is probably one that was shared by others. Amelia, can you tell us about any, doesn't have to be a horror story, but just not a great experience?
Sure. Yeah. So I was just thinking about my undergraduate thesis, which was kind of a saga of trying to find someone to help me do this project that I wanted to do. And it went from kind of a like horror story, like this isn't going to happen, to working out, which is great. But at first it was hard to accept that like this person that I had such high hopes of working with and, supervising me just said flat out no, that he didn't have time. And this professor who was like also, the head of the department and like, oh gosh. And so I think I ended up being encouraged by a teacher to get in touch with one of his graduate students, maybe, I don't know, 6 months later, and ended up working under her, helping her with her work, and then just kind of like finagled my way into the lab. And then he supervised my thesis. So it turned out well, but it definitely was like hard to like, something that you had such hope for to get that. But, it ended up working out in the end.
Wow, hearing no is really hard, especially when it feels like it's your entire future in one yes or no answer. Jessica, do you have any similar stories of? It's like deep in breath. Okay.
Well, this was one of the reasons I left the biology department at my university. So, so some things are true horror stories. I mean, okay, I'll explain. So there was a professor. She taught honors biology. She's a wonderful lady. I mean, she was intense. Um, but something that I've learned also just throughout my education, a lot of my female professors, teachers, whatever, always were just kind of known as the stricter teachers, all those things. And so I have learned to, I guess you could say, humanize people and stop, so anytime those types of narratives are created about teachers that I'm engaging, I try to figure out who they are, right? So this professor in particular, I found out, and I guess we'll get to this at some point, but she was really cool. I found out a lot about her by just having conversations, and so I understood her better, which is why I think she felt like she could come to me. And so it was December break, and I got an email from her saying, could I come by her office? And I was like, no, I'm home. I'm from Tennessee, by the way. So I had already left, whatever. And so she's like, okay, just come by when you're done or whatever, or when you come back from December break. And I said, okay. So I come back, and then she's like reading to me what's it called? End of the term, end of the semester review thing, whatever. She's like, "Did you write this thing?" And it was quite critical of her class. Now, mind you, there's two of us in the class that like write a lot and write, you know, detail. And she assumed it was me, and I was reading it, and I was like, had to think about what I wrote, right? But I was like, no, I didn't write that. Because then I started noticing the voice of the writing. And she knew it was me. Then when maybe she's like, okay, maybe it's not you. Maybe then it's somebody else. And I was just like, okay. So yeah, that was, yeah. And then I didn't know how to address it after that, at the time, because she's like one of those well-respected professors and brings all the money and all those things. And now we're cool. She tries to tell people that I'm one of her best students, but whatever. I guess that was a hiccup in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, that happened.
I
No,
love
they're not supposed to do that.
no, no. On many levels, there's some issues there. But you know what I loved about your telling of it was the phrase you used, I try to humanize people. And, I don't know about you all, but when I first came to college, professors were not human beings. They were up on this pedestal. And so to think of them as having bad days or good days would never even occur to me at the time. I mean, eventually you got that, but you're right. I'm sure it's just a series of things that just culminated in that. And I'm glad you're good now. But goodness, what a thing to go through as an undergrad. My goodness. Marina. I know it's like, wow. I know. Maybe we should have had Jessica go last. It's like,
So are we focusing on undergrad specific experiences or just experiences in general talking about professors?
I think being able to talk to professors, I mean, it ends up being more, I think, sometimes with undergrads, because that's when it feels like there's this huge power differential. And as you get along, but as you know, in different times, you'll get in somebody's lab and the power differential's right there again. So yeah, share
Yeah.
whatever might be helpful for someone else to hear that you've gone through, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I feel like in undergrad, I didn't really get to know the professors super well. It was always that power dynamic that you're talking about, I guess, was like accepted by both parties, right? Like I'm the professor teaching a large lecture and I'm a student coming to them for questions or office hours or something along those lines, or going to them for advice. But it wasn't really until graduate school that it became more peer-like. And I think things got a little bit more complicated and required a lot more tact and communication skills. And I would say like to this day, like these are still things that I am working with, because you may choose, like in graduate school, like you may choose your PI because you are so interested in their research, or maybe you really enjoy the working environment, or really or along those lines, and maybe your interactions at that level were, you know, fine. Obviously you chose that lab to work in, but as like the years progress, you really create a relationship with your PI and your professor, and then also part of a PhD program is to train you to be their peer. So I think also as you develop as a scientist, you may have conflicting ideas, and that's really, I think, where I'm struggling right now, is trying to work through those ideas with my mentor, and to be able to either if so I guess more recently is that I actually made a discovery that is like completely contradictory of what the current literature is, and for the entirety of the summer we're pretty much arguing back and forth like, this isn't real, it's not in the literature. I'm like, yes, it is real, I did all of these things, I swear it's real. And then finally, like, really what the only way to kind of progress out of that kind of like back and forth volleyball was to try to understand where he was coming from, and to try to build from that point. And that was very difficult for me. So I actually reached out to another professor who I felt I had a very comfortable relationship with, particularly because she's was a woman in color. And she gave me really great advice, like from his point of view as a professor, that I did not even think about 100,000 times. I took his criticism personally, which you should never do. It's so hard to not, but you should never take the criticism personally. And then she explained to me as a PI, like her thoughts in a similar situation would be, okay, if we're going to try to bring something that is contradictory to what the literature says is standard, which written into textbooks, we're going to really need to make sure that all of our T's are crossed and all our I's are dotted and everything is like undeniably perfect and pointing to exactly what we're saying is the actual truth. Like, you really need to have all your bases covered. And so perhaps he is trying to ensure that, you know, trying to do exactly that. And because to me it felt like he was nitpicking, but in actuality it would be a lot worse trying to submit that research into a large journal, because they're going to be way more nitpicky than my PI. And really it was just a way that a form of how science actually works, right? It's kind of if you're going to prove something wrong, then you really need to make sure that it's actually a real result. And that's what he was preparing me for. But that was like definitely like the drama of the summer, this past summer.
I love that though. I love that, you know, you were able to pivot on what sounded like a personal negation to you understanding that he actually was just applying scientific rigor because he cares about your future on some level. That's amazing. Victoria, tell us anything.
I think the worst experience I've had with talking to a professor was one of the courses I took as a freshman. Actually, I went in for office hours. I'm a big fan of office hours, so I went in to try to get some extra help. And this professor, she kind of was like, didn't really want to help me and kind of attacked me. She was like, the only reason you're here is you want me to give you a good grade, and that's what all Dartmouth students do. And I was like, oh, that's a little aggressive. So it kind of took me back a little bit, because I was like, I just wanted to like learn this a little bit better, but okay. But I think, I mean, from that, whenever I needed help, I went to her anyway, and I was like, she can think what she wants to think about Dartmouth students or about me in general, but I ended up learning what I needed to learn for her course. And I also share that just because out of I can't do the math right now, but 3 courses a term for 4 years, I never had another experience like that. And I went to office hours all the time, and every single other one of my professors were so happy to help me and did not think that I was trying to like cynically get an A out of them by like networking or whatever she thought I was doing. And that was the only time I ever had that experience. So I think just you might get professors that things like that happen, and it's not anything to think that you did anything wrong, because I never had anyone say that to me again, or not to like be afraid to talk to other professors, because for the rest of my 4 years I spent probably too much time in office hours with everybody else that I had, and everyone else was so kind. So just don't be afraid of, I think, if you do have a negative interaction, sometimes it happens and you just kind of move on and hope for the best for the next time.
I love that. I think that is perfect. And so this is a great pivot, actually. You know, we've talked about the down and dirty. Actually, each one of them, though, has had this little sprig of hope as you were even discussing those. So, Jessica, you told us about, making the change to biochem, I think you said, right? So tell me a great experience you had and what you learned from that experience going forward, actually.
Right. Well, going from the biology department to the chemistry department was
Okay.
probably one of the better things. Well, I mean, it was biochem, but I
Okay, good.
mean, yeah. So being introduced to the chemistry world was probably the better decisions that I had made in college. And what it allowed for was the opportunity to really practice communicating with professors because, I switched after my freshman year. So, I was still quite new. Um, and yeah, I mean, one of the things was, I just, you kind of get, I don't know. I mean, the way that the department was in and of itself, what was that the professors were quite open, but, the better experience, one of the best experiences was when I took analytical chemistry and wasn't understanding everything. Um, but just would go to the professor's office hours, like Victoria was talking about, and beyond just asking questions about the work, I would just ask him questions about himself. And his name is Dr. Kalapathy. He's a phenomenal person. He's still my mentor to this day. Like the other day, he emailed me to be careful. And yeah, I consider him like a granddad now that I'm graduated, and we just kind of chat. But to say all of that, I mean, going to his office just for office hours to really having conversations just about him and asking him how he's doing, to really learning about the things he thinks about and how he thinks about the world. It really broadens your experience and it really enriches it beyond just schoolwork, which is something I always encourage for students is to really get to know your professors if you can, because you learn a lot more. Like all of my professors in the chemistry department taught me so much more beyond chemistry. So, yeah,
I
that was
love that. I love that. So, we're already getting some best practices here. Use office hours, not to get a better grade, but to actually get more information on both the content of the course, but also the content of the human who's teaching you. Danielle, do you have any office hours stories to share or another great?
Yeah, I think I agree with Jessica that it's really just like professors that like vibe really well with you. Like when you do find those people, it makes like learning a lot more fun. For me, my research lab for Minds, Machine, and Society lab, Professor Basodi, if any of you have a chance to work with him in the computer science department, I highly recommend. He is still like fairly young, but he's just like so personable with us. Like I feel like half the time we'd have research meetings, and the first half would be like talking through work updates and whatnot, and the second half is him telling us about his like trip to Boston that weekend, or just like chatting with him a lot. And for 24s who might not know about the program, Dartmouth has this great program that you can take advantage of as an undergrad called Take Your Professor to Lunch. And once a term, you can choose a faculty member to basically take to Pine with you, and you get like $50 for lunch for the two of you. And like I think almost every term after freshman year, I tried to take a different like professor that I was taking a course with that term, just to like get to know them a little outside of class, also getting that great free Pine meal. So would highly recommend.
I love it. I love it. So take your professor to lunch. Excellent. Amelia, share something. It sounds like you had a great experience with the grad student you ended up working with. Tell me some other positive stories about communication with faculty specifically.
Yeah, totally. I had possibly a similar experience to Jessica, where I really connected with one of my teachers, professors in office hours. And it was actually probably the hardest class I took as an undergrad. And it was like this infamous class that everyone was afraid of. But he really just wanted people to like learn how to think. So like every exam, it would be questions that you had like never seen before, and you would have to like, you know, use what you had learned to like tackle a new problem that he had taken from like a paper that had just come out, you know, a week prior or something like that. It was a biology course. So I had to spend a lot of time in office hours because it was tough. But we ended up, you know, asking each other questions about things outside of school, and became really good friends. You know, once I had graduated, I sometimes spend like Thanksgiving with him and his family, and like they've become like an adopted family to me. But he was the one who encouraged me to apply to that master's program at Cambridge. Like I would have never thought that I could get into something like that, or like, you know, achieve, or even, you know, like, or end up at Dartmouth for grad school. Like that was never something that I had thought for myself. And he really like pushed me to like apply for things, and like really believed in me. So it was a really great experience, connecting with someone like that.
Excellent. And the fact that it was born of what you felt like was your lack of grip on the content is great. I love that. That's amazing. Marina, tell me a great story from undergrad, something where something went really well, even if it wasn't at the professor level.
Okay. I guess so. Coming from University of California, these are very large lecture halls, especially UCSD, where 60% of the student body are biology majors. And so there's probably even more who are pre-med too. So we were all in like molecular biology, large lecture hall.
How many?
I didn't, probably 500 or more. It was like, you know, the whole like movie like stadium essentially. And so one of the things that I always did, because it helped me stay engaged in the lectures, was that I wouldn't sit directly in the front, just because they usually had like a big screen and my neck would be broken by the end of class. But I always made sure that my professor noticed me and that I participated in the class. And so two things that I always did, and this was really to keep me engaged and focused. And so if I had a question, I would just ask it. And then I would go and talk to them after class. And I would talk to them about concepts that they taught, things that I'm not clear about, things that I've heard about in media that have to do with science. And a lot of the professors were really busy after class, and maybe they have to get to another class at a certain time or whatever. And so I would just walk with them to wherever they were going and chat. And so one particular professor, so she was actually she was my like molecular biology professor. And like, because I stayed so active in class and was so present with her, she actually ended up writing me an amazing letter of recommendation. And I didn't do like the best in that class, but like, and typically she only writes letter recommendations for like the top percentage of the course, but she made an exception for me because she liked me so much. And she actually helped me with to get into the master's program that I got into, because she had a collaborator and a friend at that university. And it was and she knew about it, and it was like a brand new program where it completely unheard of, where they offer stipend and like free tuition for a master's. Usually you have to pay for it. And so it was literally because of that relationship with her, where it wasn't so much that I was seeking to like brown nose or anything. I really was truly interested in what she was teaching. And it's a tool that I have always used to try to stay engaged. And it ended up getting me here today. So yeah.
I love that. I love not only, you know, something that's servicing you immediately with the engagement, then turned into this ability to connect. I also love the fact that you talk about how these conversations and this communication was able to add depth to you as a student in her eyes, right? That it wasn't just a GPA or a grade, that it was you as this multi-leveled person. That's great. Victoria, you're seeing it from both sides at this point, right? So you have your own good stories and you get to see it through the student's eyes again too. Tell me a great communication exemplar for you.
Yeah, I think my Bio 14 professor actually is like my favorite example of like the best professor interaction I had, which is Professor Maui, and I name drop him just because like he's my favorite person, and if anybody has a chance to take a class with him, do it. But I think just similar to other people's stories, he taught Bio 14 is physiology, and I just loved the class. I thought it was so interesting, and I had like a million questions because I wanted to know more about everything. So I would go and I would pepper him with questions for a while. But he would always just keep me, and I was like usually the only one at his office hours, but he would just keep me for the whole hour, like asking about my life and wanting to know more about me and wanting to make sure that I had fun weekend plans and I wasn't studying too much type thing. So he just like was a really caring person, and he also just kind of helped de-stress me anytime I went in there, which I think was also part of his goal, is to just be like, I hope you're having fun and doing fun things, because I was also taking it during the winter. So Hanover winters, I think, can get a little bleak sometimes. So he was just very supportive and very kind. And I think from like the teaching science fellow standpoint as well, I've just seen like the professors that I work with just care so much about like your health and your ability to like do well in their class. And that's all, they just want you to learn and they want you to do well and they want the best for you. So like seeing the behind the scenes things they do to like help you out and like the ways that they're writing their exams or the ways that they're teaching, they just want to make sure it's the best for you and that you're doing okay and feeling okay. So I just have really appreciated kind of seeing that more. But again, that interaction, being able to meet with Professor Maui all the time and talk to him, he was just so great. And these professors really just care about you as people, not just as students. And I think that's awesome.
Did other people have this feeling, adversarial is too strong, but that it was kind of a you against them when you first got into college, in that, you know, what Victoria's talking about, them wanting for you to succeed? That wasn't always clear to me at the very beginning. That was news to me on some level. I figured they had X amount of information, and if I wasn't getting it, well, too bad, sort of thing. Did other people have a breakthrough moment at some point where they realized, I think as Jessica said, they're humans, you know, thinking about them as people, but does anybody have a breakthrough moment where they're like, oh, okay, I think I can do this? Just jump in. And if anybody has I feel bad because you've already told me a couple of those great stories.
Sure, I can jump in. I think it was my first or second term of chemistry, and that was a course that bio students usually took as in their first year. And it was a lecture hall, not quite as big as Maria's classes, but, like 300, 350 students in a class. And chemistry was kind of noted to be this class that weeded pre-meds out. And I was interested in being a pre-med, but it still was pretty intimidating. And I think my aha moment was in the second term. The professor who had taught my first term of chemistry, I felt that I had connected with her so much that she would still like welcome me into her office for help in a class where I was being taught by a different chemistry professor. And she just like wanted us to succeed so much. And that was really uplifting.
I love that. I love that everybody is saying the same thing. They really want you to succeed. That's why they could be doing 100 other things than teaching usually. So the fact that they're doing that, I think, is an indication. So I just want to break for a second with the audience. If you have any questions as we're going on, obviously pop those in the Q&A chat and we'll take those questions. So each of you has indicated a certain time where you had to jump in and do this communication, and it usually was needs must because you were looking for information or you had to move into a different set of courses or something. Can you give an example of a when that might not be obvious? So there might be a student who's going along, they're getting the information fine, they're not, what. Can you give an example of a good when or why to start a conversation with a professor whose work they're interested in? Victoria?
I think there's like any reason that you want to talk to a professor is a good reason. Like every time I would take a class, or a lot of times I would take a class, they'd be like, come to my first office hours and just say hi. You don't need a question, you don't need a reason, you don't need to want to do what I'm teaching, just come introduce yourself. So I think they are like very open to just talking to you, and literally, like I've done that before. I would go into the first office hours, just be like, hi, I'm Victoria, and I want to get to know you a little bit. So they really are very open to that. And you don't need to have, you don't need to be struggling in the course. You don't even need to have questions if you don't want them. You can ask them anything or just talk to them. They're perfectly happy to just get to know you as a student or as a person. So my answer is just any reason you can think of is a good enough why to talk to your professor.
Okay, well, we can sign off now. We've already all the answers. I love that. I love that. Danielle, do you have any other whys, or maybe even how?
Yeah, I think I want to chime in a little about this because I think when I started college in my first 2 years, I definitely had like the whole authority figure, put the professor on a pedestal kind of mood. And that actually made it so that I barely went to office hours my first 2 years because I was very much like, oh, if I don't have a problem, I don't want to like bother them for anything because if I don't like have a concrete thing I'm asking them about. And I think it took like a couple years for me to start getting to know professors a little more and then like feeling more, I think, confident to go speak to them. And now looking back, I wish that the first 2 years I had gone, just like popped in, said hi, got to know my professors more. So I think, and like a lot of it was just like, coming from high school, I probably was like, put Hermione to shame. I was like, these professors are high and above. And I think honestly, just there's not much to the how or why. You just like Victoria says, just like show up at office hours. If there is a professor that you want to speak to that you thought was super cool, but you're not in their class, send them an email. They'll schedule a time. And also, side note, emails don't need to be that formal. I definitely started with like the whole like, dear professor, blah, 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 sincerely, thank you for your time. Sorry for bothering you. And now it's like much more casual emailing. Um, and then you can set up a time to talk to them. But yeah, definitely just like that. I guess that's the how, just like email them and set up a time. But from my experience, most professors, like if they weren't truly interested and like passionate about what they were working about, they probably wouldn't be in the field of academia. So they love talking about their research. Like normally if you run out of question topics, just like ask them about their research and then you'll be there for another half hour.
That is such good advice. That is such good advice. Marina, tell me how you talked. I liked what you said about following up after being in class. Are there any other hows, that little hints that you might have?
Yeah, so I think what's really important, and I guess this is something that I had no idea about in undergrad, and I didn't really realize this until graduate school and being in a PhD program and whatnot, is that there are so many more professors at the school than like that teach undergrad classes. And to like really go on those like faculty sites on the biology or chemistry or engineering or comp sci pages and like read their little quick snips into their research. Because I'll tell you one thing, like we love undergrads. Like it's great because I especially love the undergrads that I've worked with here at Dartmouth, because you guys are also wonderfully talented. It's phenomenal. And you guys help us out so much. Like we like undergraduate researchers. You guys help our graduate projects. And I actually had and unfortunately COVID, they're not doing a lot of in-person lab work, but I'm sure if you're like in computer sciences or bioinformatics or something along those lines, or maybe some research that you can get involved in. But let's like pretend COVID never happened. If you just email a professor and say, hey, I'm interested in your research, do you have any positions for undergrads? Like, can I come in and volunteer time? Most of them will be more than happy to take you on. because we can always use an extra set of hands. And what that does is that gives you hands-on experience in the field that you're studying. That gives you some extra work or experience that you can use to apply to medical school, that you can use for work experience, applying if you don't want to go to graduate school, you want to just enter the workforce. Like, it's great experience for you. Like, it really puts you ahead of the game to have those things on your resume. And then it also is really great for us. Like, we love it. Like, you may think that you're bothering us when you're emailing us, but oh my God, we want you so bad. So please just like email anyone. And even if you don't know them personally, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You'll get to know us.
So this is the point I have to jump in as a administrator of undergraduate advising and research and saying, I'm hearing Marina, and just so you know, the rules are that if you want to go and research with somebody, you can. You're not supposed to do it for free. I'm just saying these words, and Marina, you can have a perfectly stone face while I'm saying these things. Come to UGAR and find money for it. From sophomore year on, there are research opportunities through UGAR. So just come in. It just makes everything on the up and up, and it's easier to put on your resume and all those other things. The thing is also with WISP internships, there's a matching process. So I'm going to talk to Marina in her lab after this and find out what ones they have so we can get them on the WISP list, because I think she's right. I think that Dartmouth students are incredibly skilled, so it would be great to have any of them in there.
Yeah, I want just one more thing before we switch to the next panelist, is that I'm so glad that you mentioned these problems, because coming from the undergraduate point of view, I was not in a position to be able to volunteer extra time for free in my undergrad. So I totally get that. And I actually was on a work study program through the Scripps Research Institute, and that's how I was paid. So I was paid hourly for the research that I did. So if there are those programs available to you, you should do them. And there's another program that I heard of too, but I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure Dawn knows about it. But I know that all I know is that it's an undergraduate program, and it includes all the sexes, I guess, but you can get funding through that program as well to work in a lab. And so there's opportunities, and definitely ask Dawn or ask any other person who may have ideas on how you can get funding through the school directly rather than through the PI, because if you're in their point of view, like, you are free if you can do it through those programs, and that makes you even more attractive, because I'm not free as a graduate student. They have to pay for my tuition for me to work for them.
Go towards that. That's good.
Yeah.
Jessica.
Yes.
So I was just thinking of some great, hows or whys to get connected with your professors as an undergraduate.
Yeah. So I was thinking a bit about this, and the main why for me is you want to get to know your professor, and you want them to get to know you as early as you can. Not so you can get an A, but so that if you are slipping in the class, they actually care. Like, they actually are triggered by that. I mean, one time I wasn't doing well in my biology course, and I think my grade was like, it had gotten to a C+ in the mid semester. And like, I think I was doing fine after that. But anyways, this was the same professor who, anyway, it's a love-hate relationship with her and I. I mean, we love each other now, but anyway, but she kind of knew that wasn't me. I'm more of like a B+, B-ish, maybe A. Her class was impossible. But again, another point. But so, you build that community and that relationship. And so definitely the why is just so that, if you do start to struggle and you don't know how to approach your professor, they know who you are, and they know maybe they can approach you a little bit better. And then secondly, my how, I always tell people just kind of think of some icebreakers. I know like I'm the type of person that likes to plan conversations days ahead. So I don't appear too awkward. One of the things that I love to ask people all the time, all my professors, you can say it's unprofessional, whatever. Everybody loves ice cream. So I always ask people, what's their favorite ice cream? You know, if I'm just coming in and I don't have real questions, you know, I just say, hey, I was just coming stopping by. How's your day? Blah, blah, blah. What's your favorite ice cream? And then they're like, what? And then it just starts a conversation. Sometimes people are like, oh, I don't have one. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? And then it goes on. And you really get to learn about people. You ask them what their favorite sport is. Like I said, my Dr. Calapathy, Dr. K, you know, I learned that he at 63 plays cricket. You know, it's just, it's the fun things, and really don't be too hard on yourself if you don't have any like questions that pertain to the particular class. You know, just ask anything, because remember, they are humans. I know like we all went through grade school, and in elementary, if you saw your teacher at the grocery store, you were like, oh my God, why are you here? So, from a young age, I really tried to kind of like tell myself, these people are humans. Jessica, they do the same things as you. So, that's something you can tell yourself. And yeah, just make it simple. Find something that you like to talk about, maybe ask them about it and see kind of where things go. You never know.
I love that. We are getting close to the end. Thank you. This has been incredible, by the way. Thank you. You've been incredibly forthcoming in your sharing, and I think that it's going to be really helpful to those coming up after you. And I just wanted to talk about a couple of takeaways that I heard. The main one is go to office hours. I think that is the biggest takeaway. And the second one being that professors are human. I think that's the other big element, and remembering that as both what you hear from them and taking that into consideration, and the questions that you might ask. I'm not sure if Take Your Professor to Lunch is happening right now still. Does anybody know? It is? I'm not sure, but I'll find out about that. But do that, because I think it's a great idea. You know, figure out ways of staying engaged, not only in the class, but on how you can take that engagement and move it into the office hours as well. I also wanted to talk a little bit about your peer mentor, if you have one. So we have this peer mentor program. I don't know if all of our panelists know this, but that also might be a tool for you. If you have a peer mentor, say, you know what, I was thinking about talking to Professor blah, blah. Is that somebody you know? And go in with them. It's not weird. It's an introduction. It's, you know, again, they're human beings. You can say, would you introduce me to them? Or would you write an email saying, hi, blah, blah, would like to talk to you about whatever. If you feel like you need that extra level, reach out to someone in your peer mentor group or your peer mentor family and see if you can do that, or go in with another first year. The two of you can go in together. That's great too. Yes, Jessica.
I don't want to interrupt, but I just want
No.
to say that that was something I always did. There was a couple of people um, in my departments that I took classes with, and we would go to professors together. I mean, it was our thing. It was like, are you going to Professor so and so? Okay, I'm coming, I'm coming. You know, so yeah, the buddy system works. It really works, and it makes it easier because yeah, it's just great.
I love that. Wonderful. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close. It's a very quiet chat. There are no chat questions whatsoever. So that means you guys did a really great job. That's my takeaway. You probably will, however, get emails from people once they start watching the video. So just get ready for that. And you're like, oh, I do have a question, as it turns out. I want to talk a little bit about how next week, now that you've learned how to talk to your professor, next week, we actually have our first science faculty spotlight. And we'll have, I think everybody's on the mailing list, so you hopefully will sign up for that as well. And this is 3 scientists who are just telling a story, basically. This isn't about you coming and taking their class. This isn't about you coming and doing research for them. This is 3 women in science who really like it, and they want to share how much they like science with you. So it's going to be kind of a wonderful time. Also, for those who are thinking about, okay, so what about winter term? As most of you know, we moved the WISP internships from starting in the winter to hopefully starting in the spring, depending on what spring looks like. And a winter term is going to be filled with funded opportunities for research training, basically. There'll be more panels like this, but there'll also be some training sessions where you can be paid basically to go and do things on certification for the protection of human subjects, which is important, learning how to train in Python, MATLAB, R. We're going to do other analytic tools, library resources. There are a couple of PIs who want to give virtual lab tours and also do virtual attendance at research lab meetings. They usually have these weekly lab meetings, like, we're doing them on Zoom anyway. We'd love to have students come and see what that. I love people who know them are laughing. It's like, I can't believe they're letting them in. It'll be great. I'm sure they'll be on their best behavior. But it's really trying to replicate some of what we think of as the onboarding into the research experience. So again, I can't thank the 5 of you enough. This was a great hour of learning a lot about what it's like being a woman in science and navigating that. Thank you so much again, and be well.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.